Howdy folks, Ryan Kalajay here with Epic Nature LLC in Amherst, Wisconsin, and today we're going to be talking about barb. Rhubarb, that is. I don't want to talk about that. I need to tell people that rhubarb's easy to grow. I'm going to tell them why it's easy to grow. There's a reason that the Epic Nature logo is rhubarb plants. It's one of the first things we planted, and it's one of the things that has grown the best for us here in Wisconsin. Here we have some rhubarb plants that we planted about 4 years ago, and these things are growing like crazy. Right now they're in the flowering stage, and this is about the latest you want to start picking your rhubarb. As you can see that it still has good red color, and it's nice and crisp yet. Okay, if you wait any longer to pick your rhubarb, it's going to be big, green, and woody. So rhubarb is actually a vegetable, even though that it's considered a fruit, or at least it's used like a fruit by a lot of people, considering that it's called a pie plant. And this is to illustrate a couple very important points of getting your rhubarb to reach its full potential. One is that we have at least 6 inches of, this is a hardwood sawdust, on top of the soil level. Okay, that retains moisture and it keeps down all the other types of weeds and grasses. The next thing is this extensive root structure. Okay, the first uses recorded over 2,000 years ago by the Chinese was using the rhubarb root for medicinal purposes. But we're going to go down to another plant and we're going to dig that up, and we're going to start by digging down right next to where the base of this plant would be. And we're going to leave that entire root structure in the ground, and hopefully the root structure will regrow a new rhubarb plant, and we're able to take this cluster of crowns out and start a whole new patch with that. Here we're going to dig up a couple of these plants here, and this entire bed was planted all at the same time 2 years ago. And you can see that this little patch in here has really struggled to do well. And that's because someone forgot to put mulch down and keep the weeds and grass out of here. So like I was saying before, that mulch, keeping the weeds down, that's really going to help your plants do well. All right, so we're going to dig one of these up. This is not the time of year to be digging up rhubarb and transplanting it, but we're going to show you anyway. Like I said before, you're going to want to dig pretty close to that plant. All right. So this is a single crown. Now this can be planted directly. All right, I'm going to dig up a bigger one and I'm going to show you how to divide it into individual crowns. Rhubarb is a fairly deep-rooted plant, so you're going to want to get your shovel in here fairly close and get in fairly deep, or else you're not going to get enough root with these crowns to come with it. The bigger the plant, the deeper you're going to have to go. And I like to go most of the way around just to make sure we get all those tap roots out of there. All right, you can see we're able to get pretty much the whole clump of root to come with that. All right, we're going to wash this up, and then we're going to show you how this all breaks apart into all the different crowns that you're going to plant. we're going to give this little root cluster a fairly vigorous washing so that we can see what we're doing a little better. All right. Okay, are you ready to see this? Okay. This is an individual plant. Can you see that? Can you see how that came off of there? This tiny little, what they'd call a crown, and you can peel back some of this other stuff. If we just take this leaf off of here, you can see these little white, tiny little white buds growing out of this. That's why they call it a crown, because it's got these little, what you'd call them, little spiky things growing out of the side of there, which will all form their own little crown eventually. This is a viable rhubarb plant. Okay, so when I go to break up a cluster like this, I'm looking for what you'd identify as its own plant, and then you can gently press down in here with your thumb, down in on that root, and you can feel it's loose. And if one doesn't want to come, if more than one wants to come, then you can just take this whole cluster and out it comes. All right, I don't know if you're able to see that. That now we have 1, 2, there's 3 plants, there's 3 crowns in this cluster. And we can plant this all as one, or we continue to break this down. If you just kind of squeeze this, okay, this feels like it's coming off, so that root is gone, that root's gone, and out it comes. Another viable rhubarb. Okay. These don't really want to separate. Oh, there they come. Okay, we got a rhubarb plant there. Got another rhubarb plant there. You can just keep going. Another one, another one. Oh, now we're getting into the center of this. This was the original plant. I don't know if you can see this dark brown. That's going to be called crown rot. And some amount of crown rot is to be expected on older plants. And I would have a knife with me usually to cut that out. And see, we did too much damage here. See, we just killed that. See, this is all broken up. The top of the crown came off. That's garbage. This one here, okay, crown is still intact all the way around. Looks like a healthy bit of root on there. All right. See, these are tiny and maybe not worth your time to be planting them individually, so you can plant that whole thing together. And you don't have to peel them down to nothing. See what happens if you get too overzealous with your divisions. See, I cracked that in half, so this root isn't even going to stay attached here when I put it in the ground. But if there is one little white thing growing out of there, you still could plant that, but probably a waste of time. All right, we got a bucket full of rhubarb plants to go in the ground. So we've got a dozen individual crowns out of that one root cluster. So when you have your crowns that are this small, they're pretty delicate. So you could put these directly into your garden, and the spacing would be 3 feet by 3 feet in a square or a checker pattern. But when they're this small, I like to actually put them in a nursery type setting so that they can get plenty of water and plenty of care. So we're actually going to do a 6 to 8 inch spacing on these. And these roots need to be buried up to the top of the crown. So we're going to dig this hole about 3, maybe 4 inches deep. Okay. And once we have these in the ground, they need to be covered with mulch. The mulch keeps the moisture in and it keeps the weeds from growing. Kind of a very important step is to get these mulched right away. And I would say that you can do about 1 inch of mulch per 1 inch diameter of the root. So if you're transplanting a much bigger root mass, you can put a lot more mulch around it. These smaller ones cannot push through the mulch if it gets too deep. So make sure that you don't over mulch the center of this plant. All right, so here we are in a finished planting of what's going to be our next bed of rhubarb. These plants are spaced 3 feet by 3 feet, and these are actually from a nursery that was planted a year ago. So they grew 1 year in a nursery, and now they were transplanted very early in the spring. We dug these in April, just after the frost got out. So they've had already a couple months to get established in here, and you can look how healthy they are. We've also added a couple inches. You know, this is maybe 3 inches of mulch on here. You could go a little bit heavier, but you don't have to. As long as you can keep the weeds down and the moisture in, these things are going to do really well. Fast forward a couple years, and here we have your beautiful patch of rhubarb. So let's just go over a couple of the basics of pulling this. Number one is you want to get a firm grip on your stalk so that it actually comes pulling all the way from the base of this plant. You don't want it to break off, so you get a firm hold on it and you pull straight out. And it should make a popping noise. And you can see there's some paper on there. And this is the edge of the root. So this broke cleanly from the rootstock, and there's going to be no flesh left to rot on top of your root. And you can't really see it, but there's already another little stalk that's ready to come in right behind it. So by pulling these out, it's going to allow that next one to come right back in. And then it's as simple as taking this leaf here, break the leaf off, and you've got your good rhubarb. You know, when you pick it, it should be nice and firm, and it should make a nice crisp snap to it. That flesh should be crispy and watery and delicious. Sour, but palatable. If you can't eat your rhubarb raw like this, you're probably a little bit past prime. So what did we learn today? Rhubarb is easy to grow and it's great for you. Thanks for watching, and follow me for more pro tips.